So thank you for watching. This is just kind of, I had some questions come up about my first video. If you have not seen my first video, I'll put a link to it below. I suggest watching it first before you watch this one. But so to answer some questions, and let me see if I can answer them where it's be kind of suitable for everybody. So the first question was, how do I know that he wrote this in grid form when there are no grid lines present on the cipher? And that is a good question. That's actually something I thought about too. So if there's no grid lines, then how do we know that the picture that I found is actually a picture, unless we knew that he actually did this on grid paper? And again, I really have no way of determining that other than the fact that if you look at the cipher, everything is in almost perfect order. I mean, horizontally, vertically, diagonally, everything is in perfect form. So just by going off of that, I just determined that he actually used grid paper. Now, there could be a good way to prove that that's what he did if they haven't already done this already. I mean, I don't know what, I've never seen the forensics file for what they did to the cipher itself, so they could have already done this. They could actually get a piece of grid paper and hold it up against the original paper that he sent and see if they line up. I don't think much is going to change between today's grid paper versus 1960s grid paper as far as the sizing. They all should be the same. Another thing they could do is, if they haven't already done this, is analyze the ink and determine what kind of ink it was used. And what I mean is, was it a liquid ink or was it a carbon copy ink? So that would be another good way to determine whether he actually transferred from a grid line via carbon copy paper to the original paper that he used. So I mean, that's the only thing I can say about that. I mean, again, it was just kind of speculation on my part that he actually just used a grid line of some sort and then transferred it. So the second question is, how did I actually come up with the patterns when I made the connection between them? So again, if you look at the first one, and let me flip this around. So if you watch the first one, you notice that I actually found these backward L-shaped patterns first, and then I just made a comparison between these two and went around the pattern, and that's when I found this one and this one and this one and this one. And then I just started making other comparisons based off of these two that would be in the same proximity of one another. And that's how I came up with that one, that one, to that one, to that one, to that one. Again, if you haven't watched the first one, please watch the first one. So I think one of the questions was brought up to me was, and I believe everyone had agreed that this is a pattern and that these possibly could be ducks. Again, I'm calling this duck number 1, duck number 2. But I think the question was when I determined that what I found up here to be clouds, that I was just, at least that's how I was taking it, that they thought that I was just taking any kind of random patterns and adding it to this and just saying, okay, well, that looks right. So to clarify, that's not at all what I was doing, nor was it what I was saying. So when I say that I was trying to find other patterns to connect these two, I meant that literally. So I mean, in other words, could I find another pattern that I could connect this duck to, in order, so I actually had to be pulled off of the duck somewhere in order to find a pattern, to find a connection. Well, I never could find one on duck number 2, but if you recall on the my first video, and maybe I did it backwards from how I actually found it. So again, when I pulled off of let's say the top of it, and try to compare them with other symbols, you know, around. And I even went this way to try to compare them this way, you know, vertically, horizontally, diagonally. And I did every single one of these until I got to this one. And so the pattern I found with these two is that if you go up diagonally 4, so again, if you go start from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, there is an F. And if you go up this way diagonally 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, there too is an F. So when I say that they had to be connected, I meant that literally. They had to actually be part of this pattern in order for me to be satisfied with it. Now, I mean, you know, no one knows really how I am about things. Just know that that's something I would just never do and then just accept it just because I wanted to accept it. Because again, I have spent hundreds of hours on this thing, and I never could find any kind of pattern or proof that satisfied me and that what I would know would satisfy somebody else until I actually came across this, which I wasn't looking for it. I just happened to be staring at the screen because I was just trying to come up with an idea, and I just started marking every patterns that I could find. And while there are other patterns in this cipher, I cannot connect them to anything. The patterns that I'm about to show you here is literally connected to it by the bill of duck number 1. So again, if we just mark these, and that one's already marked, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, there is an F, and we go 1, 2, 3, 4, there's an F, and if we keep going up 2 more, 1, 2, there's a backwards P, 2 more, backwards P. So I marked those. Now again, I wasn't looking for this. I happened to stumble upon it when I was trying to find other connections. So I think the question is now is, well, I think somebody may have suggested is that I'm adding other patterns without trying to find a connection to this and just saying, okay, well, it looks right. I mean, that's not what I did, and that's not what I'm doing. And so again, I am literally finding a pattern that is connected to one of these ducks. In this case, it just happened to be duck number 1 from this one. So what about on the opposite side where it's exactly the same symbol? Can I find a connection between this one and this one, or any other part of the duck for that matter? And there is none except for this, for the bill. And the only connection there is that they intersect at the F right here. Which also, if you go diagonally this way, it too is an F. So now I can connect these two together just via the F. And also that if I go from this diagonally, it is an F. If I go this way diagonally, there's the F. So that tells me that all these, from this point, this point, this point, this point, and this point, are connected. I mean, and again, I'm not just randomly choosing patterns and accepting them as they are. That's not what I'm doing at all. They have to be connected in order for me to be satisfied with it. So there's that, and I hope that answers anyone's questions that I have on that. I mean, I don't really know else how to explain it. And while again, I do understand that there are other patterns. As a matter of fact, let me show you some of the other patterns that I have found. So there's that. I mean, that's a pattern, but I cannot connect that to anything, nor does it look like anything. There's that kind of pattern, but again, none of these I can find any kind of connections. Even when I try to find connections to other patterns, I can't do it. There's that kind of pattern. There's that one, which I don't really know. It kind of seems like it could be something, but again, I can't find anything to connect it to. And you know, some of these patterns, and that's why I said in the beginning, maybe it still says something, and maybe that's just where these patterns actually connect to. And then if you stick everything together, and I know there's going to be more that's been used from different methods, but these are just the ones that I have found, and they're just a jumbled up mess. And I believe that was all of them. So, I mean, I hope that satisfies anyone's concern over this on how I came up with this pattern. So the next one is, so why did I make the interpretation, or why did I interpret the ducks as swimming in the water versus land? So again, if you just look at these, they look like ducks, right? So there's no pattern suggesting that they have legs. So the reason why I determined them being in water instead of land, so like grass, is because if you look at the behavior of ducks on how they act in water versus land, so if we're saying that they have no legs, so in water, the only way you won't be able to see their legs is because their legs are actually submerged beneath the surface and you can't see them. Whereas in land, if you won't be able to see their legs, then that would mean that they're lying down. But again, if you watch the behavior of ducks, when they're swimming, it is common that the little ducklings, as I'm calling these, usually swim behind the adults, and you know, almost exactly the same kind of pattern, except for one or two that may try to swim beside an adult, or maybe actually in front, which is probably the case with this one. To whereas if they were laying on land, it is common for the ducklings to sit around, and typically it's the mother, so either huddled up against the mother or underneath the mother, and they do this just for to keep warm and for protection. So again, if you look at how they end up interacting with each other on water versus land, you'll see that the pattern on the way that ducks are interacting as being behind the adults and not just huddled up next to them suggests to me that they are in fact in water and not land. So that's how I interpreted that. So the next one was, well, why did I determine this one as being trees instead of, like, I don't know, rocks or just land or whatever? So if you go back to the 408 Cipher, I mean, he suggests that he loves killing people more than he loves killing wild game in the forest. So which actually kind of brings me to something else, you know, kind of how I view all of this now. So the reason why I made these trees, because I'm now determining that he is actually in the forest. So then you might say, okay, well, they're in water. You can make those trees, but that doesn't mean that they're in a forest. Agreed. However, I made them trees because I believe that this is actually in a forest, and the reason why I believe that, I mean, what else is in a forest other than trees? There are swamps, there are lakes, there's ponds. Anywhere a duck hunter would go to kill their wild game. And so after seeing this, so now that's just kind of what I maybe not interpret, it's just my opinion, is that the Zodiac killer is actually, or was actually, a duck hunter. I mean, I I don't know else how to put everything together other than now by these ducks. And he was probably, again, just my opinion, he was probably an avid duck hunter. So what I mean by that is he probably had stuffed ducks mounted on his walls, trophy ducks, if you will. So, and I don't know what the filings say. You know, if any investigators went all to the suspects' houses, and if they noted if any of the suspects had ducks, you know, hanging on their walls or anything. So I believe that would be a good way to narrow it down, is if they did make the determination that there was foul on hanging up on the wall, then it would just be another way to connect them. Also, another thing they can do now, if they haven't done this already, is they could go back, if they still have records from the 1960s, and if they were actually required to get a hunting license, a duck hunting license, then they could probably go back and check and see if any of their suspects had ever registered for a duck hunting license or has received a duck hunting license. And I think that would be even closer to finding out who the Zodiac killer actually is. And again, this part is actually, again, just, this is my interpretation or my opinion after seeing these pictures of the ducks, that he was just probably an avid duck hunter. And I could be wrong. I don't know. That was just kind of the first thing that I thought of. Let me say this too. If you were to do this on your own and remove all of the numbers and all the grid line, but make the grids visible on everything, sort of like a coloring book, is what I'm getting at, and just do an experiment. I mean, I'm not going to do it only because I think everybody would say, oh, well, yeah, you're kind of biased on that. You're just making everybody do what you want to do, and you're not going to show it. And actually, that's not something I would do, but I understand why somebody would think that. But kind of make this as a coloring page and give it to other adults, and you can either do this on the computer if they know how to do the field and coloring things in, or just give them some crayons and just ask them to interpret it themselves. Don't tell them what it is. Just ask them to interpret it and color it the way that they believe it should be colored. And I believe you're probably going to get almost the same variation or interpretation as I got. So I mean, that's just kind of an idea I had. Maybe it would take away some of the skepticism of my view of it. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify a few things. I don't know if I'm still going to end up getting, you know, some pushback on it, but if I do, that's fine, and it's quite understandable. Because I mean, again, finding ducks on a cipher that has never been solved before, it seems a little bit too, I'm not sorry to say too good to be true. It just seems like a little unlikely. However, I mean, I have looked at other patterns, again, some of the ones that I have found that I can't connect into, and I will be honest, I don't really look at anyone else's work. I try not to follow other people's work. I try to find things totally myself and then work off of it. So again, and why I call these clouds is because there's really nothing else that I could determine them be. I can't really determine them as being ducks flying, because again, I think he would have shown some kind of V formation to show ducks flying. So anyway, that's all I have. I just wanted to answer some questions that were given to me, and I hope I satisfied them. I know that, you know, the question about whether he used grid lines or not. Again, they may have already determined that. I don't know. But I just kind of assume that's what he did, because again, if you look at the cipher itself, it's just in such a neat, orderly fashion that that's probably what he did. And if anyone knows if they have already determined that that is what he used, yeah, please leave a comment below, and I'd appreciate it. So anyway, thanks for watching.